Although I find this lady's video interesting, the response to this video is also fascinating. Many have accused her of presenting a scam, while others confirm that it is not a scam, but complicated and hard to do. In other words, it requires discipline. She has failed to explain why this works, and that failure has brought all the wrongful negative comments. This video that I'm creating will attempt to explain the concepts of why this works, and with this understanding, you can follow her video and become more productive. You must break difficult problems into smaller parts to understand each part. In her video, she has two bouncing balls in the air at the same time, and this causes confusion. So let's define each ball separately. So let's first of all explain the mortgage bouncing ball. Here she states that using her method, in 77 months, you can save $176,000 in interest. So let's take a look at that more closely. She states that when you start with a $135,000 mortgage before the first payment, then after the $10,000 payment, you fall into this category right here, which as you can see is $125,000, which is $125, $121. It's month number 65 of the mortgage tables. You just skip paying $652.60 of interest for 65 months. And that adds up to $42,412 of interest that you did not have to pay because now you jump to this part in the mortgage table. It's actually more because the average internet interest payment would be $703 the first month minus $652.60 the 65th month, and that average is $677.25 per month times 65 months would be $44,021. That's the actual savings and interest by paying this $10,000 up front. After 14 total months, she can pay her second $10K payment towards the mortgage and end up with a mortgage principal balance of $115,128 as shown here, which places her at the 114 months on the table. The interest for the past 49 months, which is 114 minus the previous 7 months, 65 months, equals 49 months times $600. It's approximately $29,440 of interest savings. When you add up the mortgage savings of $29,440 for the second 7 months, plus the $44,021 for the first 7 months, end up with a total mortgage savings of $73,451.25 for the 14 months that you were doing this. You have to subtract the $938 interest, which is $469 times 2, $469 interest on the first round. Each round gets less than interest. We'll call them the same. So $73,000 minus the $938 ends up being $72,523.25. That's the actual interest you saved in 14 months from being paid into your mortgage. Now let's take a good look at the line of credit bouncing ball. There are those that argued, oh, the line of credit's not necessary, just pay it directly towards the principal. So let's do this. These numbers here shown on the screen show 7 months of paying $1,100 directly towards the principal. You end up on the mortgage table down to week 52, which is 13 weeks short of 65 on the table. So you end up losing $8,483.80 in savings. So don't sit there and tell me, oh, it's just as good to do this, because it's not. So let's move on and explain the line of credit bouncing ball so that it makes sense to you. I want to keep the focus on this part of the presentation, therefore I'm going to block out the left part of this page and only talk about her line of credit numbers. So how can you borrow $10,000 and while paying $1,100 a month, pay it off in just 6 months? Well, it's obvious you can't do that. It's impossible. How can this work? I believe it works because of credit before debit and the fact that you're not borrowing $10,000. Let me explain. You normally work to earn a paycheck and then you use the paycheck to pay your bills. Same here, you already paid your previous month's bills and now you deposit your full check into the line of credit and then you start borrowing to pay this month's bills. At the end of this month, you owe $8,900 plus $117 interest. So you know you owe $9,017. But guess what? The same time at the end of the month, the next check comes in for $5,200. So now subtract $5,200 from the $9,000 you owe, and you end up owing $3,817. So once again, you're not borrowing $10,000. You're borrowing less than $5,000 each month. That's why you can pay it off in 7 months. This works because you're not borrowing your $4,100 of expenses. You're sort of borrowing it, but you're paying it back with the next check. So you don't accumulate the expenses into your total loan. Your loan is for the $4,800 of the first month. And you're not paying the $8,900 every month because the $4,100 is repaid with every check. And that's what brings it back down to under $5,000. So like I said earlier, it's a credit of your check and then it's a debit from your check, each paycheck each month. The month 6 check brings the balance of the line of credit down to zero, but you can't borrow $10,000 at that point because you still have your expenses for the rest of that 30 days. So you have to wait to the 7th month. And then you'll be under $5,000 when your check covers your $10,000 withdrawal. And that's why this all works. So there you have it. Her line of credit bouncing ball is a reality. Math doesn't lie, just like she says. The numbers work. And she's never borrowing $10,000 on her line of credit. She's always borrowing less than $5,000 because of the recurring payment of her expense loan. So there's no reason this doesn't work, and I'd like to hear your comments about this.